There is another very important phase of warfare. It has as its target not the body, but the mind of the enemy.
On infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy.
It's all a wonderful lie, sold to you as utopia, but what you're going to get is dystopia.
Mr. Huxley, in your new essays, you state that these various enemies of freedom are pushing us toward a real-life, brave new world, and you say that it's awaiting us just around the corner. First of all, can you detail for us what life in this brave new world which you fear so much, or what life might be like?
Well, to start with, I think this kind of the dictatorship of the future, I think will be very unlike the dictatorships which we've been familiar with in the immediate past. I mean, take another book prophesying the future, which was a very remarkable book, George Orwell's 1984. Well, this book was written at the height of the Stalinist regime and just after the Hitler regime. And there he foresaw a dictatorship using entirely the methods of terror, the methods of physical violence. Now, I think what is going to happen in the future is the dictators will find, as the old saying goes, that you can do everything with bayonets except sit on them. That if you want to preserve your power indefinitely, you have to get the consent of the ruled. And this they will do partly by drugs, as I foresaw in Brave New World, partly by these new techniques of propaganda. They will do it by bypassing the sort of rational side of man and appealing to his subconscious and his deeper emotions and his physiology even, and so making him actually love his slave,
So the World Economic Forum declared that they must establish a new world order. Yes, they also acknowledged that they may not be successful in establishing this new world order, and that's due to times being, and I quote, hyper-partisan and polarized. However, they do say that they're hopeful to establish it in the near future.
Here at WEF, I believe we're discussing, there's a lot of discussion about what the new world order will be, or how, even in the context of our new Helsinki, how do we work towards that new normative international order that allows us to address our differences and disputes as the civilized world. And I believe perhaps we are at the moment in such a hyper-partisan, hyper-polarized time that we're not going to be able to form that new Helsinki today. But I hope going forward we are able to do, we must form and improve our normative and international institutional order internationally so that we can address these complaints. I hope this time round, once we're building this new world order or new rules-based order, the voice of the global south and the developing world is included.
As I said, it's all a wonderful lie. So we have quite a few interesting topics to take a look at today, but really I think we may be witnessing the collapse of the World Economic Forum. Yes, one can hope. However, we do have a few signs that actually point to this. Now, okay, you could call it wishful thinking, but hear me out. So first, at this point, it's getting pretty hard for me to tell if in fact all of these people are just stupid and crazy, really believing the nonsense they spout, or if it's just all a lie. But there is one question we have to ask ourselves, and that is, why would they believe their lies still work? It blows my mind. Now, more than likely, there is a psychological aspect to this, something that I'm just not familiar with. But what I'm thinking about is maybe it's kind of like they can't see the forest through the trees. Their egos, their savior complex, their echo chambers. Well, it puts up these barriers, blinders if you will, and they simply just don't see the reality of their agenda. Or perhaps, they know exactly what they're doing and it's all about control. So I want to propose that question to you. Let me know what you think. So, do they really believe that they're the good guys here? Do they really believe that? Or is it something far more sinister? So yeah, just leave a comment and let me know what you think. But really, how can anyone with a straight face claim the things that they claim? I don't know. Lies, insanity, or stupidity. Now, I think we have to go with the assumption that they are lying, And the reason being is because, well, they can't be that daft and delusional, right? I mean, come on, if you have a brain, a pair of eyes, and discernment, well, you should be able to clearly tell that this is, well, a lot of this can be summed up as just the mad ravings of a collective of lunatics. There is one big issue, though. These lunatics have institutional support and power.
Of the land and creating the droughts and melting the ice and raising the sea level and causing these waves of climate refugees predicted to reach 1 billion in this century. Look at the xenophobia and political authoritarian trends that have come from just a few million refugees. What about 1 billion? We would lose our capacity for self-governance on this world. We have to act. So in answer to your question, I would say we have to have a sense of urgency much greater than we have yet had, and we need to make some changes.
Yeah, these are the people who want to run the world. Yes, as a leading technocrat spokesman for sustainable development, aka technocracy, Al Gore is truly the inmate who desperately wants to take charge of the asylum. So anyway, his attempt this week to pull off his Greta Thunberg moment, trying to shed off his notorious stiffness, well, it resulted in one crazy rant, where he claimed that carbon emissions and greenhouse gases are trapping, and I quote, as much extra heat as would be released by 600,000 Hiroshima atomic bombs exploding every single day on Earth, end of quote. That's right, you heard him correctly, 600,000 Hiroshima bombs every single day. Now, according to his bizarre rant, which he further said is quote-unquote boiling the oceans and creating quote-unquote rain bombs and atmospheric rivers resulting in millions and millions of climate refugees. And I quote, climate refugees are expected to reach 1 billion in this century. Now, he said this before, of course, turning to the classic xenophobia trope, and that this xenophobia was somehow unleashed on the world in the process due to the quote-unquote climate Hiroshima bombs. Now, yeah, that's pretty crazy, but by the time you're done watching this video, I'm pretty sure, if you didn't know this already, that you're gonna come to find out that they're all out of their damn minds. Now okay, the other indication that I'm pretty sure is pointing to the fact that we're seeing a pivotal moment in the downfall of the World Economic Forum is this right here. So, Klaus Schwab is 84 years old. Well, 82 or 84. Look, his mid-80s, okay? Anyway, they're beginning to look for a new tyrant to lead the movement of destruction. And I quote, furious MPs and commentators are enraged as speculation mounts that Tony Blair could be taking over from Klaus Schwab as head of the World Economic Forum. In response to the possibility of Tony Blair's appointment, one Tory MP urged the World Economic Forum to quote-unquote distance themselves from Tony Blair if it wants to retain any sort of credibility. Now I'm just saying, in my eyes, the World Economic Forum lost their credibility a long time ago. Now okay, I'm going to continue talking about this story at the end of the video. I have a bit more to say about this, and I think we have cause to believe that the World Economic Forum is not going to make it. But I'm going to save that to be, I don't know, a little white pill to send you off with. So, if you don't have time to watch the whole video, but you want to hear that, you can skip to the closing section. Anyway, let's continue talking about the possible successor to Klaus Schwab, Mr. Tony Blair. Ah yes, Tony Blair. The fact of the matter is that Tony Blair is insane, ineffective, and has little to no public support. So one thing he has going for him though, when he's vying for the job of global dictator, is the fact that he consistently pushes for the digital imprisonment of the world. And he's been following this agenda for quite some time. So Tony Blair speaks at Davos 2023 saying that he wants a digital database of who is jabbed and who is not.
You need to know who's been vaccinated and who hasn't been. Some of the vaccines that will come on down the line will be multiple shots. So you've got to have, for reasons to do with the healthcare more generally, but certainly for a pandemic or for vaccines, you've got to have a proper digital infrastructure, and many countries don't have that. In fact, most countries don't have that. We are going to have a whole slew of new vaccines, injectables, that give us the opportunity to make big changes in the health of the world.
Yes, Tony Blair is calling for a national digital infrastructure, which will be needed for the medical interventions, if you get my drift. I'm still not sure what big tech's bullshit rules are related to this subject. So this quote-unquote digital infrastructure he is talking about is digital ID, or, health passports. They are pretty much one and the same, and they have been pitching this for quite some time.
And the unvaccinated. So both here at home, if we do have to adjust some of the freedoms because of the rising pressure from new variants, then it's important at least to ensure that those people who are vaccinated have the maximum freedom they can. And I think that could also be done for travel. If you're double vaccinated, it should be much easier to come in and out of the country. And indeed, round the world, I think you will find that countries start to distinguish between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. So in Europe, for example, they're going to allow you to travel freely within Europe if you're double vaccinated. You get proper proof of vaccination. I mean, actually, the NHS ex-people have done a good job in the NHS app, but we need to make that interoperable with other systems so that you can use this as proof of vaccination. You're facilitating it. So I think that there may well be situations in which people decide they don't want to make that distinction. But I think you're going to find in many settings, people do want to know if they're going into that setting that the people around them, if they're mixing in close quarters,
this whole
have been
argument
vaccinated.
reminds me of something going back for some years. This is ID cards by the back door, isn't it?
Look, I was then, I remain even more convinced today, particularly with biometric technology, the world will move to biometric ID, and they'll do it because in the end it's better for people. It's not about, look, the amount of information government's going to have on you is going to be minimal compared with what your local supermarket has on you. So this is a completely sensible way to go, and I think you will find right round the world that people move in this direction because it will facilitate the access to government services. And by the way, in some of the developing countries, it will cut out biometric ID. I mean, as you know, my view is the whole world's getting changed by technology. The big political debate we should be having, we're not really having it, is how do you master this technology and harness it for the public good? But in every single field of our work, our leisure, the way we interact with each other, technology is going to change everything. So, you know, biometric ID is just one part of a much, much bigger picture. Face this situation in the future, we're going to have to create a global infrastructure to deal with future pandemics, because I think what has happened to us is probably part of a change that is going to be just normal life for the foreseeable future.
So, quite literally, all of this is tied together. If you remember, behind the scenes, the World Health Organization is smoothing a path for a pandemic treaty. These are amendments to the international health regulations, and this immediate threat, as they describe it, redefines the entire status of the WHO. Your rights and your country's sovereignty are not a part of the plan. So just one example of this becoming our reality, you know, the linking of digital ID, the financial system, and social surveillance. Well, for the example, let's go to Turkey. Yes, they are planning and launching a central bank digital currency. And guess what? Yes, they want to integrate it with a digital ID system, and this is going to go live next year. Things are moving pretty fast now, aren't they? And I quote, "The digital Turkish lira system will be integrated with digital identity and quote-unquote fast." An official report from the country stated that the fast payment system is going to be run by the central bank in Turkey. So there we have it. What was called a crazy conspiracy theory just last year is now becoming a reality. A central bank digital currency that is going to be tied to your digital ID. So this is pretty much going to be the norm for every single country on the planet. Yes, it is in fact global. So as I said, the digital ID health passport system is planned to be tied to your financial accounts, your social credit score, your personal carbon trackers, and it can even monitor various things such as your internet browsing history, your shopping history, your DMV records, your criminal records if you outlaws have one. And yes, it is true that it can even be used to track your movement via GPS monitoring. However, let's go back to the search for quote-unquote Mr. Davos. Yes, they certainly do call it that. And so the campaign to find the next quote-unquote Mr. Davos is going to pretty much just end with another idiot being placed into the position. We'll get a lot of their crazy speeches, their plans for controlling populations, and of course their incessant need to limit your ability to simply live life. Well, it's going to end up being too much for any man or woman to handle. A leadership problem at the World Economic Forum holds the potential to destroy it all. And again, one can hope. However, my point is that there is not a single person that the public is going to trust. There is not a single person that's going to be able to withstand the coming onslaught. No one is going to be able to weather the storm of outrage that will naturally come. Once people become just another number, another statistic, another QR code, another de facto prisoner within the new technocratic system, well, the outrage is going to be palpable. And it could cause a domino effect of global revolution. We just have to keep pushing. The consistent push of people realizing the truth related to their dictatorial mandates, their God complex, and their authoritarian nature. The blowback is just going to be too much. And we even saw one of their more vocal tyrants resign, Jacinda Ardern. And well, here's a look at her constituents hearing the news.
And so today I'm announcing that I will not be seeking re-election. And that my term as Prime Minister will conclude no later than the 7th of February.
Now there is one caveat here, and that is that her replacement is following the same exact agenda.
I think early next year we'll be in the phase of chasing up people who haven't come forward to get their vaccination or have missed their bookings and so on. So everyone will be able to get a vaccine between now and the end of the year. But of course, you know, and I want every New Zealander to come forward, but human behaviour suggests that there will be some people that we have to actually really go out and look for, and some of that may spill into next year. But our commitment is everyone will have the opportunity to get the vaccine by the end of the year. Everyone will, but I can't say that, you know, that we're not going to have some hesitant people or some people who just haven't come forward that we don't have to go out and find next year.
So New Zealand is not out of the woods yet. Now there is a bright spot. All of you talking about this agenda is pushing them to the brink. And please, you cannot let up. I mean, really, I just hope people realize the truth before it's all installed. Otherwise, the fight against it is going to remain an uphill battle. I mean, it's an uphill battle already. But we're getting there. Slowly, but we're getting there. Anyway, let's continue exemplifying just how delusional these people are by taking a look at the FBI director's comments at this year's Davos event. Yes, FBI Director Christopher Wray was at Davos 2023, and he says, and I quote, "The level of collaboration between the private sector and the government, especially the FBI, has made significant strides," end of quote. Yeah, let me just repeat that. The level of collaboration between the private sector and the government, you know, stakeholder capitalism, corporatism, merging the government with corporations, you know, fascism.
And I think the sophistication of the private sector is improving, and particularly important, the level of collaboration between the private sector and the government, especially the FBI, has, I think, made significant strides. Pretty much every technology we could talk about today, we see both great opportunity but great dangers in the wrong hand.
Anyway, he also stated that the FBI's main concern is about technology getting into who they determine are the wrong hands. Yes, the FBI director is openly bragging at the corrupt World Economic Forum about how much the FBI partners with big tech to censor free speech of Americans. So apparently the Twitter files did not scare them. The FBI seems quite proud of its tyranny, end of quote. And yes, I could not agree more. So, as I said, the collaboration between the private sector and the government, this is corporatism. This is the face of fascism. And no, I'm not talking about the social media kind, where if you disagree with someone politically, well, they label you a fascist. No, I mean real fascism. It's pretty textbook. The merging of government and corporations tied to their tyrannical authoritarian social mandates. Well, what else would you call this, huh? Exactly. You would call it fascism because that's exactly what it is. Although we've talked about this before, we can have arguments over semantics, but I think it's going to techno-fascism, some kind of fascist technocracy. Now, there are lots of people talking about FBI Director Christopher Wray's comments about their agency's partnership with the private sector. You know, as it relates to their modern FBI activity. You know, being a Gestapo for the establishment, basically. However, he talked about something else that we've talked about many times. Specifically, we talked about it in relation to a company called Palantir. Yes, that is the Peter Thiel company that works on pre-crime initiatives. Yeah, Minority Report style policing. Dystopia at its best. So the FBI is a criminal investigative agency, meaning that a crime is committed and the FBI mission is to investigate it, solve it, and bring the information to the Justice Department for prosecution. At the very least, that used to be the role of the FBI. However, not so much anymore. However, we should note that the FBI director's remarks, every element of the FBI mission is framed around quote-unquote prevention of criminal activity, or what is commonly known as pre-crime. Yes, preventing crimes before they happen. Now, this is where things get really, dark, I guess. So in the era following the 9/11 attacks, there was public outcry around the issue of quote-unquote how and why did law enforcement, specifically the FBI, not prevent the attack. In just about every conversation following the attacks of 9/11, every framework has been about how to prevent an attack. And this is how it all started. So the bullshit 9/11 Commission itself was focused on learning lessons from the attack. Thereby, the direct and implicit message was to construct systems to prevent another attack from happening, essentially to move the FBI from a reactive footing in the aftermath of a crime to a proactive footing to prevent crime. So we do have to realize that when the fundamental mission of an investigative agency changes from investigating the aftermath of criminal activity to the prevention of criminal activity, well, when that's the case, we as a society open ourselves up to having severe restrictions on our liberty. After all, just about everything we now see as an infringement on our freedoms is just a form of proactive action by the government. If you change the mission from investigating crimes to the prevention of crimes, the entire apparatus of the mission fundamentally changes as well. Criminals are no longer the target when you are preventing crimes. Criminals are only targets after they commit crimes. When you are preventing crime, basically every single person who could commit a crime is now the new mission, the new target. So basically everyone, regardless of their connection to or association with criminal activity, is now a potential criminal, a potential target. And of course, that also means that potential criminals must also be monitored. Potential criminals are now the target. You are a potential criminal. Now, as a result of your potential ability, you are now a target for pre-crime investigation. Now, of course, that also means that within the process of this pre-crime investigation, your archaic views of freedom and liberty must be dispatched. So as we all know, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence was created to turn their war on terror internally to the domestic population. Yes, every single American is now a potential domestic terrorist. Thus you see FBI Director Christopher Wray sitting on a stage, and openly admitting that the FBI partnership with the private sector are key to the mission, a mission of pre-crime targeting. So are you starting to see how this is going to go? As soon as the FBI changes from investigating the aftermath of a crime committed to intercepting the potential criminal conduct, well, things get very, very murky, sketchy, and weird. When the FBI is investigating crimes, you have rights. When the FBI is preventing crimes, those rights, well, they just get in the way. I mean, come on, our entire legal system is structured around criminal accountability. An event takes place, and we hold the criminal accountable. Well, that used to be the case, not so much since George Soros got in the way. But yeah, so judges, lawyers, courts, systems, processes, protections, rights of the accused, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment. You know, hundreds of years of rules and regulations within a criminal justice system are just going to be thrown out. We do not have a pre-crime justice system. The current FBI mission is pre-crime enforcement. Just think about the ramifications. It shouldn't be hard because we are living them. The FBI is basically the Stasi, the Gestapo for the establishment now, and it's only going to get worse. So, do you want to know how the pre-crime initiative will be monitored? Well, it's going to be with smart headbands, hats, earbuds, headphones, quantum dot tattoos. Your location, biometrics, inclinations, emotional state. Yes, your very thoughts can now be read by outside parties. What could possibly go wrong? Well, pretty much everything. And it will go wrong.
This is a developmental system made by MC10, and it has an antenna and some sensors embedded in it. And what we plan to do is work with them to advance a tattoo that could be used for authentication. Now, it may be true that 10 to 20-year-olds don't want to wear a watch on their wrist, but you can be sure that they'll be far more interested in wearing an electronic tattoo, if only to piss off their parents. Right? And that's something that you wear, but you could also imagine including authentication in just your daily habits. So I take a vitamin every morning. What if I could take vitamin authentication?
What?
Vitamin authentication. Look, I have one right here. Well, here, I'll let you hold it. Would you like to hold it?
I'll hold it.
Okay. So this...
You guys see it?
This pill has a small chip inside of it with a switch. It also has what amounts to an inside-out potato battery. When you swallow it, the acids in your stomach serve as the electrolyte, and they power it up, and the switch goes on and off. And it creates an 18-bit ECG-like signal in your body, and essentially your entire body becomes your authentication token. Yes, this is true. Okay?
Okay, but
Okay, so wait. So it's really true. So what this means is that becomes my first superpower. I really want this superpower. It means that my arms are like wires, my hands are like alligator clips. When I touch my phone, my computer, my door, my car, I'm authenticated in. First superpower. Like, I want that.
You glance at the program running in the background on your computer screen and notice a now familiar sight that appears whenever you're overloaded with pleasure. Your theta brainwave activity decreasing in the temporal regions of your brain. You mentally move the cursor to the left and scroll through your brain data over the past few hours. You can see your stress levels rising as the deadline to finish your memo approached, causing a peak in your beta brainwave activity right before an alert popped up, telling you to take a brain break. But what's that unusual change in your brain activity when you're asleep? It started earlier in the month. You send a text message to your doctor with a mental swipe of your cursor. Could you take a quick look at my brain data? Anything to worry about? Your mind starts to wander to the new colleague on your team, whom you know you shouldn't be daydreaming about, given the policy against intra-office romance. But you can't help fantasizing just a little. But then you start to worry that your boss will notice your amorous feelings when she checks your brain activity and shift your attention back to the present. You breathe a sigh of relief when the email she sends you later that day congratulates you on your brain metrics from the past quarter, which have earned you another performance bonus. You head home jamming to the music, with your work-issued brain-sensing earbuds still in. When you arrive at work the next day, a somber cloud has fallen over the office. Along with emails, text messages, and GPS location data, the government has subpoenaed employees' brainwave data from the past year. They have compelling evidence that one of your coworkers has committed massive wire fraud. Now, they're looking for his co-conspirators. You discover they are looking for synchronized brain activity between your coworker and the people he has been working with. While you know you're innocent of any crime, you've been secretly working with him on a new startup venture. Shaking, you remove your earbuds.
You may be surprised to learn that it's a future that has already arrived. Everything in that video that you just saw is based on technology that is already here today. Artificial intelligence has enabled advances in decoding brain activity in ways that we never before thought possible. You've heard a lot about AI over the past few years. Here at Davos, it's been the talk of the hour. But I want to talk about it in a different way, which is the ability to decode brainwave activity. After all, what you think, what you feel, it's all just data. Data that in large patterns can be decoded using artificial intelligence. Consider this, the average person thinks thousands of thoughts each day. As a thought takes form, like a math calculation, you're happy, you're tired, you're hungry, you're elated. Neurons are firing in your brain, emitting tiny electrical discharges. As a particular thought takes form, hundreds of thousands of neurons fire in characteristic patterns that can be decoded with EEG, or electroencephalography, and AI-powered devices. In fact, what you're seeing here is my brain activity while I'm wearing a simple device like the one on the right. We're not talking about implanted devices of the future. I'm talking about wearable devices that are like Fitbits for your brain.
But she says, and I quote, "It's like a Fitbit for your brain." Yeah, a Fitbit for your brain. No big deal, right? They also say that they can read your facial expressions and read your thoughts. So, let me ask you, do you trust the FBI? Do you trust intel agencies? Do you trust various world governments with that tech? If you do, then I don't know what to tell you. Good luck. Okay, so let's move on. Let's move on to the panel on extinction. Yes, you heard me correctly. The World Economic Forum declared a doomsday planetary and justice crisis.
Dear friends, scientifically, this is not a climate crisis. We are now facing something deeper. Mass extinction, air pollution, undermining ecosystem functions, really putting humanity's future at risk. This is a planetary crisis.
This is a safety crisis, but above all, it is also a justice crisis. Many areas in the world are uninhabitable. This uninhabitable zone is increasing. If we continue with our greenhouse gas emissions, then by 2070, as many as 3 billion people will live in uninhabitable zones.
And I quote, "We're now facing something deeper, mass extinction." Whew, what about that fear porn, huh? Anyway, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres tells politicians to make unpopular decisions today. And that's because he says, once again I'm quoting, "It will be essential in the shaping of public opinion itself in the future."
Politicians need to understand, and sometimes we are faced with this kind of challenges. It is better to take today decisions that will eventually be not popular, but it will be essential to be able to shape the public opinion itself.
Basically what he means is that politicians should ignore their voters and make them bend to their will. I just hope students and psychologists in general have in-depth studies related to group mentalities of the masses, the herd mentality, and of course we cannot forget the God complex, the megalomania of the quote-unquote elite.
Because we need more. We need more psychology. We need more understanding of human nature, because the only real danger that exists is man himself. He is the great danger, and we are pitifully unaware of it. We know nothing of man, far too little. His psyche should be studied, because we are the origin of all coming evil.
Yes, this group of lunatics is certainly the origin of all coming evil. So okay, let's move on to forcing compliance. Yes, bending everyone to their will and forcing compliance with their plan is pretty much a common theme at this year's Davos event. And I quote, "A warning, only those companies who comply with the dictated industrial transformation will have the greatest competitive edge." So from Bernie's tweets, they say, listen up businesses, comply or die. And yeah, that pretty much sums up the message pretty well. As I said, forcing compliance is a common theme here at Davos 2023. So let's go back to Al Gore. He says, and I quote, "All the anti-climate businesses must be destroyed and quote-unquote reined in by the unelected gods of the World Economic Forum."
Enough already. Enough. And I don't want to get sidetracked onto what needs to happen, but we need to scale up climate finance, but we need desperately to scale down anti-climate finance. And we are still subsidizing the burning of fossil fuels globally at a rate 42 times larger than the subsidies for the shift toward renewables and EVs, etc. We need new leadership at the World Bank. We need them to scale up the leverage and vastly increase the amounts that are committed. And we need to rein in the anti-climate activities of the fossil industry.
Only what your new masters decide is acceptable should be funded and survive. And yeah, governments, I guess, listen to these lunatics. And look, the reality is, free speech is the greatest threat to their plan. For example, this is Richard Edelman, the CEO of the world's largest PR company, instructing businesses to deprive platforms who don't follow the World Economic Forum narrative of advertising in order to destroy them.
So I think the first thing that, because I mostly work with business, that business needs to do is deprive platforms that spread disinformation of oxygen. Stop advertising. Pull your promotion money. Make sure that they understand that they have a consequential impact on society. And the boycott of Twitter for several months has had a modest impact, but I think the Facebook one failed. But the necessity of getting it right in the platforms that are probably primary source information for a third to 40% of people is urgent.
And then we have this one too. So basically the premise is, you'll go nowhere and you'll be happy. And so this is from the Davos event entitled In Harmony with Nature. And yeah, they always try to make it sound so nice, but in reality, it's tyrannical.
Yeah, so I think what's important for policy is really to change the rules of the game, no? So that sustainability becomes the easier choice, not just for the people, but also for the companies, no? So I think an important measure in Switzerland was to have support for renewable energy, for energy efficiency, but also then changing the way districts work. For instance, in Zurich we have a lot of districts where you actually don't need a car because all the activities, school, buying something, everything you can do in walking distance, And by doing that, people don't buy a car, and it's not felt like actually they would like to have a car and they are not allowed to have it, but they simply don't need it because the environment was built in a way that they don't need it. And I think this is what policy needs to do. They have to change the environment. So a sustainable lifestyle, a lifestyle in harmony with nature is the easiest way to go. And also for the companies. And here perhaps a last point. I really like what you said on following through. We had all these nice commitments. We had the Paris Agreement. We also here at World Economic Forum have every year very nice commitments. What's important is really to follow through and also to also shed the light. Sometimes you're very critical with those who are acting, say there are, and we need to be critical, and see that there's no greenwashing, but we should also put the light on those who are not acting. And I think policy needs to try, and I think, for instance, Biden's suggestion that the government only buys with companies who commit to Paris, who commit to science-based targets. I think that's a smart policy. So that policy tries to leverage also the action from companies and somehow gets all companies to act. I think this is a smart way to do politics. In the end, policy needs also to be smart because, again, we need to have the buy-in from all the population, else we're not re-elected and change is not happening. So it needs to be smart policy, which is at the same time also transformative.
And yeah, should I play that again? I mean, I know. It's kind of hard to hear them over the sound of their gas-guzzling private jets and yachts. And yeah, here we are, listening to a bunch of hypocrites lecture us. But yeah, the main point I wanted to make is, isn't it just so nice to see how he casually suggests that strong arming companies into compliance by withholding contracts is, and I quote, smart policy. A smart way to do politics, he says. I mean, do they even hear themselves? These people are insane. Now, okay, so besides the fact that they openly talk about how they need to destroy all businesses that don't comply with their plan, or how governments, politicians should, ignore their constituents, fall in line, or perish, well, we now have to talk about their plans for controlling every aspect of your life, and confining you to what amounts to de facto house arrest. As he said in the previous clip, there's a need for 15-minute smart neighborhoods, or as he called them, sustainable districts, so that people will never need a car again. Yes, they're going to try to manipulate the situation to make it so that owning a car is out of the question. As I said, their slogan should be, you'll go nowhere and you'll be happy, or else. Now it does get worse, okay? It does get worse.
So this video is a video of the principle of the line, which is really the revolution in urban design that NEOM is pioneering. And we can talk a little bit more about that as we go through the rest of the panel in the session.
So when I'm looking at this, it's a grid infrastructure.
Yeah, so basically the way it works is it's 170 kilometers long, 200 meters wide, 500 meters high. Wow. The height is from the sea level, so as you go inwards and the topography actually goes up, then the height of the actual building structure reduces until you get to the mountains where it actually, you no longer have a mirror line. The idea is about what we call zero gravity urbanism, which is not necessarily having to be linked and anchored to a ground. How can we think of cities that go vertical and not only horizontal. This has many benefits. It's 5 minutes walk from all of your needs. Each module is 800 meters wide, and each module will take 80,000 people on average. Obviously, some are going to be more densely populated than others. And when you do it this way, you're only 5 minutes walk away from your school, your hospital, supermarket. The other thing is that the catchment area becomes a lot bigger. The catchment area for businesses becomes an 80,000 catchment area within a 5 minute walk, which, as you can understand, instead of opening many pharmacies or many stores, that one store will service a much bigger catchment area than it typically does in other cities that have, 15, 20,000 people in even dense cities, catchment areas like New York and London. The idea as well is to reduce the footprint. So imagine 9 million people living on 34 square kilometers. And if you compare that to other cities, it's almost the 2% of the size of London, yet taking the same amount of population at end state. The first module is going to finish in 2027, end of 2027. And as you can imagine, this is a generational project. So it will continue to go on until 2045 when the whole project is complete. We think of this as not a start and an end. This is a city that is being built, so it's being designed forever, and hence the glass walls to give it its timeless appeal, as well as a integration with nature in a way like you would never see before.
So, some are even going from a concept of a 15-minute city to a 5-minute city. So basically, you're going to be stuck in a high-tech prison block with, a few amenities here and there. Just enough to keep the sheep happy. And docile. Cannot forget docile. And I quote, "A 5-minute city where citizens will be imprisoned and controlled, sold to you as the perfect utopia, where all you will ever need is within a 5-minute distance of your pod. A dystopian nightmare you would never vote for, so they won't ask you to." Yeah, exactly. Yes, that is right. Unelected global tyrants are trying to dictate how you have to live. And no, of course, you will not have to vote on any of this, because that's beneath them. After all, they all seem to believe that they are the select group of people, touched by something extraterrestrial to save the planet. And if that means destroying your life, well then, so be it. It's for the greater good. And as we've talked about before, the quote-unquote greater good is also known as the murderer's solace. But okay, let's move on to their war on food.
Thank you to His Excellency
Now for this clip, we have to go to Simon's chairman, Jim Hegman.
It's a very important point that you are addressing. My daughter, 24, inspired me and said, "Dad, how can you advocate for these zero-carbon value chains if you still eat meat?" And so I stopped eating meat. Now the math would say, well, you need to stop eating meat 11 years to compensate for a flight to Thailand. Yes, but if 1 billion people stop eating meat, I tell you it has a big impact. Not only does it have a big impact on the current food system, but it will also inspire innovation of food systems. And I predict that we will have proteins not coming from meat in the future. They will probably taste even better. So why are we trying to mimic meat if we can have a better taste? They will be zero carbon and much healthier than the kind of food that we eat today. That is a mission that we need to get on. I can inspire you to maybe look at an organization called EAT, easy to remember, EAT, who have all the facts on this and who have the policies necessary, the innovations necessary, and the scale necessary in order to make food systems sustainable and healthy.
And I quote, "If 1 billion people stop eating meat, it will have a big impact," end of quote. Yes, he goes on about how they're going to have proteins that don't come from meat in the future. They'll taste better, he says, be zero carbon and much healthier. Yeah, I doubt that. Yeah, I doubt that. It's going to be industrial seed oils and other carcinogens. But besides that, besides the obvious health risks involved with this lab-grown meat and these alternatives, so get this, I did have a glance at their dinner menu, and turns out it's all meat products, basically. So yeah, hypocrisy at its best, once again, every single time. These people need to preach what they live, and stop being fucking assholes all the time. So yeah, basically that giant tech company and its chairman there have completely sold out to technocracy and are vying for total control over humanity. So yeah, upending traditional agriculture makes way for artificial lab-grown proteins and insect farms, which are already being built. We have seen stories like this already come out, like this one right here on the screen. They can eat whatever they want, but they have no business telling you what you should eat. How can so many people be okay with the government controlling every aspect of your life, including telling you what food is acceptable and what is not? What media is acceptable to watch and what is not? Look, I don't know how old a lot of you guys are, but aren't we adults here? Come on. But the sheep have to sheep, I guess. I don't know. And there is one other reason why I do not want to take advice or any kind of suggestions from this guy. Well, his company has their own sordid history of using forced labor during the reign of Adolf Hitler's National Socialist Party. And the current CEO of that company, Roland Busch, well, he said last year that no one should pressure Beijing over forced labor, as it might stall the progress of the green agenda. Yes, perfectly fine with forced labor, but telling me not to eat food that I like. Yeah, save me from your moral high horse, dude. I don't have to be lectured by you guys. You're freaking lunatics, man. You're crazy. And of course, a typical talking point, they say the science is clear. The consumption of meat and dairy products must be reduced to achieve the climate goals. End of quote. Yep. Not me, man. Not me. Yeah, so basically, the fires and explosions that have been happening at food processing plants in the United States? Well, apparently, we have a whistleblower talking about it. And I quote, "In the United States, dozens of food processing plants suspiciously caught fire over the past year. And remarkably, no one was present at the time of the fires. So, strangely enough, we have a whistleblower from EcoHealth Alliance, which you might remember from a certain lab leak fiasco. Anyway, the bioterrorism expert, military veteran, and scientist Dr. Andrew Huff, well, he does say that there's a possible explanation for the food supply fires. So this guy Huff, well, he has access to government information about simulating a food supply attack. So the information actually comes from the US Department of Homeland Security. Now apparently the documents also include which places are particularly at risk. According to Huff, who authorities have harassed due to the nature of his work since 2019, while he claims the US government coordinated the attacks on the food facilities. But in addition to that, something remarkable happened. The hard disk with the data disappeared. And ever since then, there have been about 200 food factory attacks around the world, most of them in the United States. So check this out. Apparently, he claims to have had a backup, and he analyzed the attacks. It turns out that the attacks exactly matched the most critical systems in his dataset. Now, he did report this to Homeland Security and the FBI, but never received a response. And as we talked about the FBI, I wonder why, huh? I wonder why. Now, Andrew Huff also does claim that the FBI and the food industry have tried to investigate what he calls terrorist attacks, but they're getting nowhere. He suspects that a government-funded actor or a globalist group like the World Economic Forum is behind it. And, yeah, I hope we find out, because that is some weird coincidences, don't you think? And, yeah, I don't think they're coincidences. We've talked about the attacks on the food supply quite a few times. But, yeah, they just keep happening. It's very strange. And with their agenda on the war on food, the Great Reset, everything we've learned about the FBI, everything we learned about the government in relation to COVID, well, at this point, nothing would surprise me. So, yeah, I wouldn't put it past them to attack our own food supply. However, I will say, in fairness' sake, that it could also be our foreign enemies. Look, I'm not too sure how to explain this, but, yeah, anybody with a brain and some common sense knows that Russia does not believe they're only at war with Ukraine. They are at war with NATO and, by proxy, the United States. It could also be China. Look, a lot of people believe that China's going to make a move on Taiwan by 2025. China and Russia are in alliance. They are creating the BRIC financial system. they're not going to have two world systems. They want a single global order, which means war is likely. And yes, I'm sure both sides are already preparing for this. Now, that includes attacking critical infrastructure. So I'm not too sure, I'm just saying, it could be lots of different things. However, their agenda moves forward. Yes, it does. But yeah, let's move on into the new digital reality. So first up, the World Economic Forum discusses using AI to create and enforce a climate and social credit system to incentivize and punish behavior.
We governments need to, both support the development of the new and better stuff. We need to punish what we want to have less of, to carbon pricing and so on. And we need to sort of create enabling environments for the speedier uptake of a more circular, more renewable, and more sort of nature-conscious economy across the board.
I think those kind of activities is really important to get acceptance by the society. That is very important. But at the same time, I think more broadly, in order to promote these types of initiative, I think we should think about how we can measure a social impact by this kind of use of the AI. And then, in other words, we are talking about reduction of the CO2 emission in the future, right? So if we can have a clear calculations or the impact by taking actions, probably that should be read into the real future reduction of the emission. And in other words, I'm talking about incentives or finance to encourage the people to do so. And probably we could think about, if everything goes well, we could think about a credit type of things. And then investing into the preventive things, and then they are getting some credit and using it.
It's not the gas alone sitting there that's the problem. It's how we use it. It's the burning of it. It's the byproduct of it. And until we can capture those byproducts, there's a certain responsibility that will fall on that industry to live up to the obligations that we've all agreed on.
Yeah, this is crazy. Now I just want to read a section of this to you, and I quote, "The metaverse is going to rely upon the widespread adoption of extended reality, the combination of augmented, virtual, and mixed reality, and the viability of digital assets, wallets, and identities to conduct business and allow for social spaces." Now they also say in the bottom section, well, they say that experts agree that the metaverse is going to be the new age of the internet, and it's going to disrupt and transform current social and economic structures. So let's go back to what they call extended reality, and I quote from the investigative examiners. "3 shared principles to maximize the value of the metaverse. We are not creating a new virtual world, but rather a way to integrate our physical and digital worlds." And yeah, I'm with you, buddy. I'm gonna pass too. So yeah, basically we're all going to have friends and loved ones who are lost in quote-unquote extended reality. And yeah, that's probably gonna happen, man.
What's on the horizon are diminished reality glasses that look very much like what I'm wearing, that would allow you to remove things from your point of view, from your view, whether that's garbage or other people.
We are going into a very, very strange future, my friends. Very strange. So on top of this, the World Economic Forum has partnered with Microsoft, yes, that's right, Bill Gates and Accenture to lay the foundations for the Global Collaboration Village, a new metaverse platform aimed at fostering virtual, multi-stakeholder cooperation. So there we go again, with their fascism. Anyway, they go on to say, and I quote, "Powered by the technological capabilities of the 4th Industrial Revolution, the Global Collaboration Village can be a model for the future of engaged, multi-stakeholder collaboration." So yeah, what better place to quote-unquote reimagine our future than in the already failed fantasy world known as the metaverse? It reminds me a bit of the old and hilarious bug extermination ad known as the Roach Motel. The roaches check in, but they don't check out.
Metaverse, I at least think about it as the next chapter, the next evolution of the internet, except it's the part where it gets less flat. If you think about the primary metaphors for the internet to date have been about web pages and literally two-dimensional objects that we peer at through screens. One of the most important trends in computing has been the computer moves from a basement to our desktop to our pocket. That has happened over the last 50 years. And we believe, I think we as an industry believe, that it ultimately gets closer to the senses, to the eyes, to the hands, to speech. And so keyboard input goes away, and peering at everything through a screen in our pockets eventually goes away. The metaverse is a way of describing the transition into three-dimensional environments.
So, would you like to know two aspects that are going to collide? Well, it's the idea for the metaverse, a technocratic society, and a threat of a catastrophic cyber collapse, which also they warned about.
We're here today to share the findings of the World Economic Forum's Global Security Outlook Report 2023. This is a result of research in collaboration with the forum's communities and our partner Accenture, in which we've interviewed and sought input from over 300 executives globally. The most striking finding that we found is that 93% of cyber leaders and 86% of cyber business leaders believe that the geopolitical instability makes a catastrophic cyber event likely in the next 2 years.
Yes, the narrative continues following the glossy World Economic Forum video, preparing you for the Internet version 2.0. And of course, to log into this new Internet version 2.0, well, you're going to need digital ID and a social credit score. So yeah, it's all a part of a broader plan.
Pay insufficient attention to the frightening scenario of a comprehensive cyber attack, which would bring to a complete halt to the power supply, transportation, hospital services, our society as a whole. The COVID-19 crisis would be seen in this respect as a small disturbance in comparison to a major cyber attack.
Now, in closing, let's talk a little bit more about the end of the World Economic Forum. So as I said, with all the insane plans and crazy rants at this year's Davos event, if you combine that with all the recognition they've been getting recently, everyone watching the discussions they have on stage, well, they have truly transcended their role in the shadows and are currently airing out in the open. Every single day, more and more people are realizing that these people are out of their damn minds. So, if we combine that with the fact that they are looking for a secession plan for Klaus Schwab, and one point in this article really struck a nerve with me, and I quote, "Mutiny erupts among World Economic Forum staff over role of quote-unquote Mr. Davos. The founder and chair, Klaus Schwab, has run this forum for 52 years, but is now seen by some past and present staff as a law unto himself. And they argue that he surrounded himself with quote-unquote nobodies, who are incapable of running the organization he founded. And yes, I kinda do agree. They're all freaking idiots, man. And they're crazy on top of that. Yes, basically we have a bunch of stupid and crazy people running the world. Not a good combo. Anyway, the group said it wanted to remain anonymous, and I quote, "We are hesitant to come forward as Klaus is very well connected and can make life very difficult for us even after we leave the World Economic Forum," end of quote. Yes, retaliation is a very, very real thing. However, they also said, and I quote, "There isn't much of a future for the World Economic Forum beyond Klaus Schwab. Not just because there is not a clear successor, but also because his managing board is such a viper's nest. Well, they say that the senior leadership is going to be at each other's throats the moment the old man pops off," end of quote. And I, for one, think they are 100% right. The thing is that power corrupts. Every single one of them is a power-mad sociopath. And when Klaus Schwab is gone, they are going to eat themselves. They will devour each other in pursuit of that power. Yes, in the end, I believe they will destroy themselves. Or they'll piss everyone off to the point that they are simply destroyed by other means. Yes, the resistance to the reset continues to grow every single day. However, until next time, once again, this is HelioWave. If you like the content, like, comment, and subscribe. Share the video if you want to. If you're in a position to, consider subscribing on Locals or Subscribestar. As always, make sure you disobey those true fascistas, and yes, I do hope you have a good night.